Welcome to the Darkstream. Voxday, voxday.blogspot.com, and the author of the Sociosexual Hierarchy. A lot of people have taken some exception to this idea of a sociosexual hierarchy. They've taken exception to the application. They've taken exception to the categories. They've taken exception to the idea that this kind of stuff can be defined in any way. But what I keep trying to explain to everyone is that, first of all, these hierarchies exist. Secondly, they are based on behavioral patterns, existing behavioral patterns. And these behavioral patterns existed and were observed and were described long before I was even born. So what I want to talk about tonight is the secret of avoiding self-sabotage. Let me repeat, the secret of avoiding self-sabotage. Now, this is something that is probably applicable to more of you than you necessarily want to believe. For some reason, a lot of young men in particular like to believe that they are more successful than they are. They like to believe that they are more socially successful than they are. And I've really noticed this with the criticism that I have been seeing directed at me and directed at Owen Benjamin ever since I started addressing the issue of Jordan B. Peterson. And so what's obvious is that there is a lot of projection involved, and there is a lot of bitterness and anger involved. And so, this question from the Dashing Rogue is actually relevant to what I'm talking about right now. He says, my problem is a bit Petersonian, translation, narcissistic. But who decides where someone ranks in the hierarchy, and is there an objective, non-biased observer? That's irrelevant. This is what I keep trying to point out. Okay? You can't fool anyone. You cannot talk your way around this stuff. You cannot rationalize your way around this stuff. You cannot pretend that things are any different than they are. And so, it's amazing to me how I see people who exhibit a certain behavior, whether it's gamma behavior, whether it's alpha behavior, and then turn around and exhibit that behavior themselves. The lack of awareness is, I would say, normal. I would say that most men really don't understand how this works. And they really don't understand the fractal concept, even though it's not that difficult. Okay? And Odd Rob says they don't like the label. The label doesn't matter. The thing that that was really driven home to me recently when I was reading the other night was the way that people methodically deceive themselves, even after they've been beating themselves up for the very behavior that they then end up exhibiting. And if you want a perfect portrait of a gamma that is completely removed from the whole concept of pickup artists and all that sort of thing, I would really, really recommend that you read a volume of short stories, an anthology of short stories by one of the greatest American writers of the 20th century, F. Scott Fitzgerald. You probably know him from the Great Gatsby. Anyhow, he has a collection of short stories. It's called Taps at Reveille. Taps at Reveille, F. Scott Fitzgerald. And I haven't read the whole thing yet, but so far, all of the short stories in it follow a character named Basil Lee. And Basil is a intelligent, good-looking young man. He's from it begins with his him being younger. It follows him to going to school out east, and then I'm at the point where I think he's at Yale. And by definition, it's not an internet phenomenon, because what we're describing here is pre-internet. We're talking about 1912. So I can't say for certain that there have always been gammas, but certainly there have been young men exhibiting this behavioral pattern for a long, long time, for well over 100 years. Like I said, these identifiable behavioral patterns pre-exist my life. I created nothing. I'm not inventing anything. If I like to describe myself as a behavioral taxonomist. Biologists didn't create the okapi. They found the okapi. They named the okapi. Or okapi, I don't even know the correct pronunciation. But the point is that these things exist. That's a good catch by Reluctant Messiah. Catcher in the Rye absolutely is gamma. Catcher in the Rye, probably is an epitome of gamma. The Dashing Road says gammas are weak-willed sigmas. No, they're not. They're not sigmas at all. Gammas, in many ways, are almost the opposite of sigmas. And what's amazing to me is the way you see people, even after you explain this stuff to them, after you tell people about these things, they promptly go and pervert it and misapply it in order to satisfy their own psychological self-identification needs. Somebody was trying to tell me the other day that gammas hate fake alphas. That's not true. Gammas hate all alphas because the gamma thinks he should be in control. And so what's really, really interesting about these stories about a character named Basil Lee, and it makes me suspect that it really makes me suspect that F. Scott Fitzgerald himself was a gamma, is that the way he exhibits that behavior over and over and over again and keeps sabotaging himself in the same way. It's almost it's almost painful to read it if you're at all aware of this sort of thing. Women do not fit into the hierarchy. Women have their own hierarchies. And so it's really interesting because what the short stories show is that Basil has a excessive opinion of himself that is not supported by the empirical evidence. He is better than the average. He is more intelligent than the average. But he has this very active and vivid fantasy life. So when he's going out to his boarding school, when he's on the train going out to his boarding school, he's fantasizing about how he's going to be a star on the football team. And I mean, he's so excited. He cannot wait to get there. And he's looking forward to being a popular person, and and it's not without some backing. He's a good-looking guy, but somehow he ends up absolutely hated. He's the least popular guy in his class. And it turns out, as you read through it, you discover that, he turned out to be yellow on the football team. He later has a conversation with the coach who says, you could be pretty good if you would just get over yourself. And so, the problem is that he's constructing these delusions in his head and then acting as if those delusions are real. And he's pissing everybody else off. They can't stand to be around him. And here's where it gets really creepy. Is in a later story, he goes back to his town. He's very popular with the girls suddenly. Suddenly, the girls all like him. He's grown up a bit. He's less obnoxious. He's basically learned to stop shooting off his mouth constantly. And he suddenly discovers that all the girls like him. So what does he do? Well, as you can imagine, he immediately gets carried away by this and ends up completely pissing off this guy who could have been his best friend and wingman for the summer, because he can't stop talking about how the girls all like him, although he's trying to do it in a way that indicates it's not a big deal to him. And so, he's presenting that gamma posturing and that humble bragging that we see on a regular basis from gammas on the internet. Lamarck has a good question. He says, are stories about the chosen one gamma? Yes, always. Always, always, always. That's why they're so popular. If you really like to read fantasy, especially if you love Harry Potter, the Patrick Rothfuss books, if you identify with those characters, you are probably a pretty hard gamma, because the key element is the concept of the secret king. The person who always has to revise the outcome and reinterpret it so that somehow he came out on top. You know, ha ha, the joke's on you. You know, if you've ever caught yourself thinking or talking about it, that is absolutely indicative of a pretty strong gamma behavioral pattern. Another giveaway, actually, in fact, we have, just so you understand, a friend of mine and I have a whole literary theory of gamma, because as you can imagine, most writers these days are gammas. The thriller, the military action novel, those tend to be written by deltas. All the chosen one stuff, any time you see a red-haired woman inexplicably throwing herself at the protagonist, who of course doesn't have any idea why she's suddenly thrown herself at him. The gamma is always the object of sexual attraction. He is never the hunter. He is never the pursuer, which, if you know anything about male-female relations, you realize is completely backwards. And so whenever you see this, it's really striking. If someone graduates from gamma, they become a delta. That's a very, very good outcome for a gamma. That's the desired outcome. The problem, of course, is all the gammas want to become alphas. And since they have absolutely no hope of becoming alphas, they want to declare themselves sigmas, which is even more ridiculous. And so the important thing to understand, if you are subject to this way of thinking, is stop lying to yourself. And most importantly, stop thinking that you are fooling anyone. You know, that's the another thing that is interesting from this book. It's really these short stories. It's really fascinating because he portrays both sides very well. He's got the scene where the gamma has done well. He's been set up with this girl. Turns out she's quite attractive. They start kind of going out. She is enamored of him and decides to, and he's been clamping down on his what he knows is his self-destructive behavior. He's been clamping down on what he knows is his gamma behavior. You know, it's not called gamma behavior. This is written long before that. But when he finally managed to clamp down on it, and he's successful with this girl, well, then she says, oh, well, my family's going to go on a trip for 2 weeks, and I can bring you. You know, they're willing to let me bring you. So he goes out before the trip, he goes out with the girl's father. And he says a little bit about he's just got his school results in. And so he's pleased about it. So he mentions that he got his school results. And the father's like, oh, that's great. And the results are pretty good. So he starts explaining more. He starts telling him exactly how he did in each class. And then he starts explaining why he didn't get a good score in one of the classes, and how he's really smart, but he was made, and he's trying to do the being humble thing. He's really smart, but he had a little bit of a big head and didn't study enough, and that's why he failed, and so forth. And he just keeps going on, but thinks he's covered for himself, because he says, oh, I hope I haven't been talking too much. And the father's like, no, it's fine. And so he's like, whew, got away with that one. Well, then the focus shifts to the father's perspective, and the father is thinking to himself, oh, thank God I went out with this kid and realized that he's, an annoying blabbermouth. The last thing I want to do is go on a 2-week vacation with him. And so the kid, Basil, gets a phone call from the daughter saying, gee, sorry, we're leaving today, and my parents decided that I can't bring anyone. And he knows that he screwed up again. And all he had to do was just not talk about himself. If you want a guideline, here's my suggestion to you, is let the other person talk twice as much about themselves as you talk about yourself. I would even recommend not telling people anything about yourself unless they ask. This may surprise you, but I have not told anyone in my personal day-to-day life that I recently finished a book, with one exception. I told the friendly guy at the gym, his thing is to just go around constantly and befriend everyone, and he's a African former professional soccer player. I still play soccer. In fact, he actually plays for a club team now that played my club last year, and so he goes around, and he saw that I was in a good mood the other day and said, so you're in form? And I said, I'm just happy I got a book done. He's like, oh, you're a writer? I said, yeah. He said, cool. And that was it. Now, just so you understand that the book is, of course, Jordanetics. It's the bestseller in political philosophy. At the time, it was also the bestseller in spiritual self-help. If you're a Gamma, what do? You're telling everyone that your book's a bestseller. But you know what? Nobody gives a shit. Nobody cares. Even my wife, Space Bunny, she's more happy that I got it done for me, because then maybe I'll clean my office and I'll actually get some sleep, than caring about the book per se, any achievement involved. There's nothing that brings a man down to earth like getting patted on the head, metaphorically speaking, by his wife when you're like, hey, I've got this great news, I did this, and they're like, oh, that's nice. In exactly the same tone that they'll tell one of your children when they did a good job at something. So anyhow, have you ever had people bait you to talk about yourself only to shade you? Yeah, well, that happens. I mean, I think people do that without even trying to, without ever trying to bait you. I think that, we make the mistake of hearing that somebody's interested and we go, oh, hooray, I can finally talk about myself. And then you go on and you go on and you go on and you annoy them. Let's see. Vox has sports. But so the thing is that there are people who care about things. There are people who care a lot about things. But, I'm sorry, this is funny. Peterson is on Rogan right now. They were going on about how many straw men his critics always make and how criticism is so bad and never helpful. Okay, this is hilarious because Peterson himself in his book says that the act of criticism is the act of a friend and that you should seek out criticism. I mean, he is such a liar. He is probably a pathological liar. And what he's doing on Rogan right now is he's doing the same thing on Rogan that he was doing after the Harris debacle. He is on Rogan right now trying to defend himself against Jordanetics. Now, he's not gonna mention it. Not yet. It's not big enough yet for him to address it yet. He's still hoping it's going to go away. Richard Dawkins did exactly that with the irrational atheist. He just ignored it, and eventually it went away. Jordan Peterson's hoping for that, but it's not going to work. Let's see. Peterson is making straw men to tear down straw men. Exactly. Tim says, should I feel bad about liking Catcher in the Rye? No, not at all. But you should be aware that your liking for that probably indicates that you have a lot of the same behavioral patterns. You're probably susceptible to the same type of thinking, and that is probably going to lead you into some suboptimal behavior. I mean, I hated Catcher in the Rye. I was cheering for the people who were giving Holden Caulfield a hard time because I thought he was just an absolute, wretched excuse for a human being. But what I have learned is that, there does tend to be intense dislike between sigmas and gammas. I really, really don't like them. And it's probably in part because they tend to perceive me as an alpha and react badly to me like one. But unlike the alpha, I'm not interested in maintaining my position in the hierarchy. I don't have a position in the hierarchy, and I don't want one. And so the whole thing is just, from my perspective, just a huge waste of time and an irritant. The alpha is perfectly content to put the gamma in his place, and as long as the gamma understands that the alpha's on top, he's happy. Crazy Life says, okay, I'm buying a few more copies of it starting to get under Jordan's skin. Oh, it's absolutely going to. The paperback is actually going to be out at any minute. I'm actually waiting for it to show up, but it will almost certainly be out tomorrow. It's not going to be on Amazon until early next week, but you will be able to buy it from Castelia Direct, and that's ideally the place to get it. Who would be other examples of sigmas? Well, the sort of archetypical sigma would be James Bond. He has tremendous success with women. He has no place whatsoever in the social hierarchy. He has no social life. and he's very good at what he does, but his only interest is doing what he wants. That's a good example. And so, are never Trumpers gammas? Well, I mean, not necessarily. People of all politics are all categories and exhibit all behavioral patterns. In general, they do tend to lean towards that way. But they don't. Like if you do notice a lot of gamma behavior from people like Rick Wilson, from people like Ben Shapiro, from people like the David Frenches of the world and so forth. Does a sigma deny the gamma any attention, further enraging the gamma? Yeah, well, it's not that we tend to deny them attention. It's that we tend to call them out. We tend to point out that we see through them, and that is one of the worst possible things that you can do to a gamma, is to humiliate him. Because when you humiliate a gamma, he will hate you forever. I've got gammas that have been banned from my blog for a decade or more, and they are still lurking at the blog and will leap in to take a shot if they see the opportunity. It's astonishing the degree to which they will harbor a grudge. I mean, I don't even remember who these people are. I'm going to give your book to JBP at his next speaking event in San Jose. That would be awesome. Alex Jones is an alpha. Alex is almost a class. Alex Jones and Donald Trump are classic alphas. They even have the physical alpha archetype. They're bullish, they're loud, they're buffoonish, they're leaders. They draw people to them. Where can I learn more about this? Go to the Voxiversity channel. There's a whole video about it. If you want to dig more into gamma specifically, there's a section in SJW's Always Double Down that's devoted to it. Is Pope Francis a gamma? I think Pope Francis is a lot more likely lambda. Vox, what's your favorite metal band? Baby metal. Is that video game trivia thing still a thing? Yes, absolutely. Yeah, definitely get somebody to film it on your smartphone when you're giving it to him. His reaction could be amusing. So sigmas have mild sociopathic tendencies? No, not at all. I'm literally the opposite of a sociopath. My empathy is actually very high. Sociopaths have no empathy. It's not about that sort of thing. Where do these terms gamma, alpha, delta come from? They originally come from the alpha, beta language of the pickup artist community. I took what Roosh and Royce were writing about and just extended it. And then it just turned out to be very, very useful in a lot of areas that had nothing to do with male-female relations. Actually, I'll admit I'm not as into baby metal as I used to be because, let's face it, they lost Mikio, they lost Yui, and the new songs are not that great. I'm much more into Bandmade these days. Let's see. What would you say is the major difference between alphas and sigmas? It's very easy. Alphas are at the top of the social hierarchy. Sigmas are outside the social hierarchy. But they are both at the top of the sexual hierarchy. You're not a sigma if you're not dating the cheerleaders and models. Okay? You know, you may think that you may want to think that you are. Oh, I'm a rebel outsider, blah blah blah. Yeah, no. I mean, even rebels and outsiders have their own hierarchies. Okay? I mean, I'll give you an example. If you want an example of what classic sigma behavior would be, when I went back to my university for my sophomore year, I had a lot of friends. There was a girl I'd been dating who was, waiting for me to get back there and all. And, of course, when you first get back, all the fraternity parties and stuff are all great because classes haven't started yet and all. And my friends were wondering where I was because I wasn't at any of the fraternity parties or anything. Well, what happened was I got really into reading Tom Clancy's Red Storm Rising, which I'd picked up at the airport on the flight out. And I ended up finishing the book in 2 days, and I didn't go out until I finished the book. That's not something an alpha would ever do. You have the parties to go to, you have your place in the social hierarchy to establish and that sort of thing. It just never occurred to me for a second to do anything other than what I wanted to do at the moment. I wouldn't say it's just about being introverted. I mean, it can help, but it's beyond that. Because there are introverted alphas. There are people who are. Alexander says, "You have a lot of friends, but you blow them off." I think that my friends would probably say that that's a reasonable description. I mean, it's kind of funny. People have described Space Bunny and I as a pack of two. And one of the funniest things and most revelatory things she ever said was one day she opened up the mail and it was an invitation to a party. And she said, "Okay, we have to move. We have too many friends." Just the weight of the social obligations was weighing on her. And I understood exactly what she meant. I felt exactly the same way. And of course, there's a reason why it was so easy for us to, go and move to a new country where we didn't even speak the language. It was, I mean, as much as we missed things and people, it was also a relief. Just because the weight of the social obligations occasionally becomes too much. I mean, it's quite common, for example, when, especially this time of year, with all the various Christmas parties and organizations and all this sort of thing, it's quite common for me to, after about 90 minutes to 2 hours, I just disappear. And Space Bunny knows it. She usually knows where to find me. She knows I can't deal with people any longer. So, I'm not sure if I would do well in Finland. They tend to have a much darker outlook than I do. What about context and how dramatically can it influence where one ranks on the? Well, context is all important. The whole social sexual hierarchy is fundamentally fractal. And so somebody who is a gamma at their school might be the alpha of their D&D group. So it's all fractal. Like, for example, the girl who shows up at the party or at the, role-playing game is almost always going to be drawn to the alpha of the group. You see this pattern over and over and over again. Is the social-sexual hierarchy similar to the Pareto principle in terms of the frequency of types in a society? No. There's more deltas than anyone else. Deltas are normal people. Most of you are probably deltas. You value your place in the team, in the organization. You want to be recognized for your competence. You probably value your friends. You do okay with women, but not as well as you'd like. You like having clear instructions. You like being provided with a vision. You like having someone to look up to. That's normal. That's what a normal delta is. That's what a normal man are, and they are the most important part of society. I mean, one of the problems with the modern society is that it encourages the development of gammas at the expense of deltas, and you need that delta competence to keep any organization going. I mean, if I was to turn this into a management tool, my whole focus with the organization would be, how do you protect and foster the deltas and help them to become successful, so that they're not being so that the organization is not being disrupted by the gammas, or being turned into a harem for the alphas. How do you graduate from deltahood? I would say that the best way to do that is to attempt to become the beta to an alpha. That's probably the best way. C3 says, I don't mind being a delta, even though according to the pickup community, I'm supposed to hate being me. You are who you are. It is far more important to be the best person that you can be, and to be content with what you are, than try to turn yourself into something that you're not. It's a fool's game to try to turn yourself into a higher performing hedonist. You're not going to find happiness that way. Even if you look at Roosh, Roosh managed to transform himself into a lady killer, and he found that it was not ultimately satisfying in the end. If you can't tell if you're a sigma or a gamma, you're probably a gamma. Can omegas rise up to delta? Yes, but it's going to be very, very difficult, because your instincts are probably almost insanely wrong. There's actually a character in the those short stories I was telling you about by Fitzgerald, and there's a kid who actually ends up becoming successful, but he has a problem where he just has this nervous tick where he's constantly going wee, wee, and you can't be accepted in the social hierarchy if you're going to do that. Are soy boys considered gamma? Yes, almost exclusively. Keep the alphas far from women. Yeah, good luck. Keep the betas close to alphas. They will. Lock the gammas to the basement and stay out of the way of the deltas. Well, the problem is the gammas tend to be smarter, and they tend to be subject matter experts. So they are useful. They are useful people. They are just challenging. Let's see. This is one of the major issues today, trying to become something you're not. Well, there's nothing wrong with attempting to improve yourself. And there are natural transitions that happen, that come over time. But they come over time. and they come about naturally. And so you have to be patient and you have to work with it. Yeah, I like what William is saying. If your compass is off, you have an intractable problem and must seek help from others, as in the case of colorblindness. Absolutely. If you don't know what to do, then find somebody who knows what they're doing, ask them, and then apply it. Don't argue with them. They know what they're doing. Listen to them. Should one content with being gamma or omega? I don't think you should be content with being gamma. I think that the level of self-delusion and dishonesty is too damaging. Omega, I think you just got to do, I think what you should do is work at learning how to function in the social world. Take a shower every day. Brush your teeth. We had a friend, super intelligent, 175 IQ, and I'm not exaggerating. We all took the SATs together. Totally hopeless if left to his own devices. I remember coming home once, being downstairs and realizing that he must be in the house and that he was upstairs and probably in my room because of the smell. And so I just walked up. It was kind of funny because I just walked up and said, "Yo, go take a shower now." He's like, "Oh, okay." It literally hadn't occurred to him that, he hadn't showered in days and reeked so bad that you could smell him from several rooms and one floor away. What do you do with that? I mean, someone like that is never going to be, an alpha or a beta. The funny thing is, he was actually a decent looking guy. And when we would take him out to clubs and we would dress him up and, make sure he was clean and everything. And it was always funny because he would invariably meet some woman who is more attractive than you would think somebody like that could ever interest. And then, you'd come over, you'd be like, "Hey, so how's it going?" And the woman would always be some totally insane girl that, believes that that she's a witch or something. I remember this one girl who was actually quite attractive, but I just burst out laughing because, here she was with our Omega friend. And I said, "Hi, how are you?" She's like, "I'm Fatima. Smell my earrings." She had some kind of these round baubles that had incense in them or something. And I was like, "Well, I think you two will hit it off beautifully." Question, what was he so focused on? Well, at the time, considering what he had on his hard drive, it was probably Japanese schoolgirl porn. They were not actually girls, but just dressed up in the outfits. This is in the days before, this is in the days of BBSs and stuff, long before the World Wide Web in itself. And he literally filled up a 10 meg drive with just Japanese girls in their outfits. He actually has pretty much devoted his entire life to developing the ultimate marijuana, the most potent marijuana seed that he can. So, we all have interest. But I've kept a number of letters that he has written me over the years because they're absolutely, utterly hysterical. The situations that he falls into are inevitably hilarious. Anyhow, This is somebody that I knew from childhood. The three of us were going to start Fenris Wolf originally. Really good guy. I quite like him. We were actually in a band together, and he wrote the music for a number of the songs, and he's a very good musician. Really nice voice. Socially hopeless. Um, Knowing what you do of Thomas Jefferson, what would you say he was? I mean, he was an alpha. Um, yeah, Ryan, you shouldn't. He says 175 IQ, laughing my ass off. I'm not exaggerating. That's literally. Um, he used to work when he worked. He used to work at the Institute of Human Genetics and would just bring home stuff that he had synthesized on their machines there. He was legitimately brilliant. Um, let's see. What instrument did he play? He played piano, keyboards, um, piano and keyboards. So, Owen Benjamin to become Castalia House author. That's really for Owen to say. Was JFK a beta? Probably. It's very common for the sons of alphas to not be alpha. Let's see. But again, it's all fractal. Getting back to your point about avoiding self-sabotage. Well, yeah, the point about self-sabotage is learn to keep your mouth shut. Don't talk about yourself. Talk about other people. Don't think that you're fooling anyone. If you're bragging, brag. If you want to boast, boast. But don't ever think that you're fooling anyone when you're very cleverly figuring out how to talk about yourself or brag about yourself, because you're just letting people know, blah blah blah. No, you're not fooling anyone. Owen mentioned the possibility of being a Castalia author today. Yeah, I would say that he has an excellent chance. Let's see. Well, this is wrong. Gammas do not attract insane women. They don't attract women at all. That's actually not true. Gammas actually do attract women. They tend to attract strong, dominant, bossy women. Bossy women hate alphas. They may be somewhat attracted to them on some level. They probably are. But they absolutely hate them. And so if you notice, look at the type of women that you inevitably see people like John Scalzi with. Many times you'll see them with a woman who actually outweighs them, who is taller than them. It's really interesting. You got to keep in mind that don't take the whole. You can't take the whole pickup artist thing at face value. Okay, everything is fractal, everything is probabilistic, everything is relative, and so there literally is someone for everyone, but it may not be the someone that you are attracted to yourself is the problem. The only thing Owen will write about is how short people really are. Yeah, that that would be amusing. I would totally publish that. Gammas are whale bait, more or less. Yeah. I wouldn't even say whale bait. I would say that they tend to be man face bait. Oh yeah, Jordan Peterson is a total gamma. There's no question whatsoever. His level of dishonesty, his wife, everything about the guy. If you want to understand what a successful gamma looks like, Jordan Peterson is a perfect example. Let's see. On behalf of me and Bolt, how do you deal with someone who wants to talk about problems constantly but do nothing about their problems? I just refuse to put up with those people. I don't. Okay. I do a pretty good job of like having minimal human contact on a daily basis. So in some ways, I'm not the best person to ask. My wife would say, cutting contact is your answer to everything. But anyhow, but seriously, just don't put up with it. Just refuse to listen to it. Just say, look, I'm not interested. You're not interested in solving your problems, so I'm not interested in listening to them. If you actually ever do anything about it, then we can talk about it. But until then, I have no interest in talking about it. You need to learn to just flat out say no. The worst gamma I can think of is, without question, a fictional character. It would be Kavoth, or however you pronounce it, from The Name of the Wind. That is the perfect gamma. What is Vox Day? Well, I've been told that Vox Day is literally Hitler. So I guess that would be. And then, let's see. Men who act like women attract the women who act like men. Perfect. That is a very good description of the process. Has any military research ever kept a man awake for 25 days? No, I think they managed it for about 6 days. Yeah, or 11 days, I think, is the world record. Kahu from Name of the What? Kavoth, Kvoth, the lead character of Patrick Rothfuss's fantasy bestseller, The Name of the Wind. It is horrible. I've tried to read it 3 times just because, it's the best-selling fantasy book. I figured I should see what's in it and why it's popular. And the reason it's popular is because it's total gamma wish fulfillment. Total gamma wish fulfillment. Okay, look, I'm not interested in what about me things. If you're not this and what is, I don't care. Okay, I just so you understand, I don't care what any of you are. I don't care what any of you think you are. I don't care what you think I am. I have no interest in that level of discourse on this topic whatsoever. I actually shut down my alpha. Well, I didn't shut it down. I just abandoned my Alpha Game blog because I was so sick of people constantly going, "What about me? What about me? What about me?" I don't care. I'm interested in analyzing the patterns of behavior and being able to use them to successfully anticipate human behavior. That's my level of interest in it. Now, it's fine that you want to better understand yourself. That's great. But I'm not a psychiatrist, I'm not a psychologist, and I'm not interested. So, let's see. My husband and I loathe our divorced boomer parents. Any chance of doing a book on boomers? Oh, I've thought about it. It's definitely possible. I've got like 20 different titles that I could think of, all of them tremendously insulting. What if you were accidentally involved with a gamma? Well, I think then try to help him become a delta. Call him on his bullshit. Don't let him, when he gets passive aggressive, tell him to knock it off and be direct. Gamma can be cured, and I think that women can probably do it more easily than a guy trying to do it himself. Have you read much Christian fiction? Not lately. I haven't read much since I was a kid. I mean, like that CBA type stuff. I never really liked it. Peterson appeared on Rogan today after no food and water for 67 days. Exactly. So, die already. Yeah, I think my favorite title would be something like, do you remember that story about Eskimo? It's way too long for an actual title, but do you remember that story about Eskimos and ice floes? So about that. All right. My energy levels are getting better every. Well, that's because I'm taking. No. I don't take anything. I have. I'm sure that the super male vitality is probably great for you. I don't like taking anything but maybe vitamin C when I have a cold. Boomers, time for the ice flow. That would be good. So anyhow, what could employees do when they have a gamma boss? Well, I would say number one, leave, and number two, encourage a gamma meltdown, and that might get rid of them. It's actually slightly embarrassing. I said more people should be introduced to Vox via The Irrational Atheist. He literally begins the book by saying, I don't care if you go to hell. That doesn't really speak well for my character, does it? But c'est la vie. Would you appear on Rogan after your media silence? No, I have absolutely no interest in speaking with Joe Rogan whatsoever. I don't think that he's honest. I don't think that he's serious. And I think that he is, I think that he's a sellout. Let's see. All right. Well, hey, I am going to let you go. Thanks for tuning in. Let me check one more time. I just want to see if they finally got it going. Nope, not yet. Okay, well, just a reminder that JORDANETICS will be out in paperback tomorrow. And I hope you will get a copy for the lobster cultist in your life. They need it. And I will look forward to seeing you all next time at the Darkstream. So, no, I don't have a podcast. And remember, the secret of avoiding self-sabotage is don't talk too much and let the other person talk twice as much about themselves as you talk about yourself. Have a good evening. We'll see you the next time.